So this short selling or unwinding, which takes place during the downturn, brings about a steeper fall, because everybody then is trying to sell what they do not have. Coming now to the Islamic system, Islam tries to reduce discipline in the financial system, first of all by a moral value, simple living. Do not spend more than your ability to spend. But of course, here is a problem. If we need something and do not have the resources at the moment, can we borrow? Yes, Islam allows this, but not beyond our ability to repay in the future. If my income is only 100 and I borrow 1,000 riyals, I will not be able to repay anyway for a long time. So when banks try to promote lending, this was done in the United States, and I'm afraid to say this is also done to a certain extent in Pakistan. Promoting debt, this is not a good thing for, of course, the banks make more profit because when they lend more, but when there is a crisis, then they lose a great deal from this. So in the United States, every family, an average family, has 13 credit cards. You can see how much lending this would promote. So the simple living in Islam depend on your own resources and borrow as little as possible. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Aqil daynak ta'ish hurran." Reduce your debt and you will live freely. If the more debt you have, the more worries you have. You are no longer a free. It is also true of nations, countries. If a country borrows too much, then it cannot afford to live in peace. It cannot live freely, because then the creditor continues to put pressure in this country and makes the country do things that it will otherwise not be willing to do. So aqil, simple living, by both the individuals and the nations, is extremely important for within the Islamic framework. وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا أَنفَقُوا لَمْ يُسْرِفُوا وَلَمْ يَقْتُرُوا وَكَانَ بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ. Those who, when they spend, they do not spend lavishly, and neither do they act niggardly. They live in between the two. This is the teaching of the Quran. Simple living, profit and loss sharing, greater stress on equity and profit and loss. Now, when there is profit and loss sharing, then the banks will be very careful in lending, because they know that they will suffer. They will scrutinize the proposal more carefully before lending. If there is no profit and loss sharing, there is collateral along with the predetermined rate of return. Even if it is flexible, there is the rate of return is positive, and the banks have an incentive to lend excessively. Debt is allowed. Does it mean that this debt is not allowed within the Islamic framework? When we emphasize profit and loss selling and equity financing, debt is allowed, but with conditions. And what are the conditions related within the Islamic framework to reduce the extent of debt? Does not allow pure lending and borrowing. In other words, I cannot lend to you money, or you cannot borrow from me money. I can sell you something on credit. Now, what is the advantage of this? In this case, the debt is linked to the real sector of the economy. The debt cannot exceed the real sector. The growth of the debt will grow with the growth of the economy. and not be excessive. So it is linked to the real sector. Debt is allowed, but with conditions, and one of the first conditions is that does not allow pure lending and borrowing. Lending and borrowing is linked to the purchase and sale of real goods and services. It becomes linked to the real economy. Sale of debt is not allowed. When the sale of debt is not allowed and I have to keep the debt with me, means I will scrutinize the debt carefully, I will underwrite the debt carefully, and then this, as a result, I will not resort to excessive lending. Creditor must bear the consequences, because if I cannot sell the debt, then I will bear the consequences myself. If I sell the debt, then I have passed the risk to somebody else, and he is the one who will bear the consequences. So this is the advantage of the values that Islam has given. Of course, there is a caveat here. I mean, if we have a perfect Islamic financial system in Pakistan, it can still fail if the government is not acting rightly. If the government borrows too much from the central bank and spends, then of course even this can create problems in an Islamic financial system. So there has to be a discipline not only in the financial system but also in the government. I know that a number of governors of central banks try to prevent the government from borrowing too much. But of course they are employees of the government, and it is not possible for them to resist too much. Now there is of course a problem with respect to this kind of a disciplined financial system. What about the subprime borrowers? They will not be able to borrow from a commercial bank in the Islamic, because the bank will be afraid that he may not be able to repay, and so those who are prime borrowers will be able to borrow, and the subprime borrowers will have difficulties. But this is where we have to be innovative, create some kind of a mechanism whereby even these people are able to borrow. After all, Islam emphasizes justice, and justice will not be there if only the prime borrowers are able to borrow. For this purpose, Islam has introduced the system of zakat and awqaf. The zakat system from this week can lend to people who are subprime borrowers, and therefore try to reduce the difficulty. Some of the ulama in the past were not willing to allow loans from the zakat funds, but now some of the ulama have allowed it, because after all this serves the purpose of zakat is to enable the poor people to be able to lead a good life. But sometimes they need to borrow. Why give only grants from the zakat funds? If we know that some people are able to repay, why not give them loans so that the zakat fund can be used in the future to help other people? So this is a very important thing. We can use the zakat funds as a portion of the zakat fund to give loans to those people who can use it productively. I mean, poor people who can use it productively and benefit from it. The money will come back to the zakat fund, and then it can be used to help other people. There is the awqaf system also, the funds of which, cash awqaf particularly, the funds of which can be utilized to give credit to people who are unable to borrow from the commercial banking system because of they are considered subprime, and there will be a number of difficulties in this, But لِكُلِّ دَاءٍ دَوَاءٌ فَتَدَاوُ. The Prophet ﷺ said, for every malady there is a cure. So you find the cure. We have to find cure for the difficulties that we face in our financial system. So what not needs to be done? Increase the share of equity and control leverage. Do not lend more than the borrower's ability to repay. If we try to promote debt, then of course we lend more than the ability of the borrower to repay. Just give enough loan so that he will not be in difficulty, and the system also will not suffer from losses. Credit for promoting the real economy. The debt has to be linked to the real sector through the purchase and sale of goods and services. The debt must be held until maturity for better underwriting. It cannot be sold. This is a very, very strict principle of Islamic finance, that you cannot sell debt. Some of the fuqaha have tried to allow it, but there has been a great deal of opposition to it. At one time, I also thought, well, what is the harm in selling debt? But after seeing this crisis in the United States caused by the sale of debt, I realized that God is right and I was wrong. So, hold debt until maturity for better underwriting. Derivatives must be used only for protecting and not for gambling. The primary function of derivatives is to provide protection, and they should be used only for this purpose and not for gambling. All financial institutions must be regulated. The general tendency was to regulate primarily the commercial banks, and a number of other institutions were regulated in some countries but not in all countries. But it is necessary that all financial institutions must be regulated. Some arrangement must be made for the poor people who are considered to be subprime. And Islamic finance can do this through the system of zakat and awqaf. Now this is, of course, Islamic finance is just a fresh way of thinking. It has a long way to go. There are a number of problems which need to be solved and have not yet been solved. However, if we present the Islamic system in a rational manner, the world will be attracted. One very grave mistake we have committed is that we have put the prefix Islamic before the system. Now, why this is a grave mistake? Because after all, the principles of Islamic finance are the principles of almost every society. Islamic finance, the principles of Islamic finance originate from our moral system. And this moral system is an asset of all societies, because according to Islam, God sent His messengers to all societies and not just to the Muslim world. There have been, according to a weak hadith, 124,000 messengers of God throughout the world. And that their teachings are prevalent in some form or the other in others. Some of them have been corrupted, but a number of these values are prevalent. And so why not, if we did not put the prefix Islamic and call the world towards the principles of healthy or egalitarian finance, then maybe we would have had greater success. Generally, when people see the word Islamic, they get scared, they want to keep themselves away. We have a tendency to put the word Islamic everywhere. Islamic economics. Why Islamic economics? The principles of Islamic economics are not unique to Muslim countries or to Islam. They are found everywhere, and if we try to bring the real principles and show how healthy they are and how they can save the world from a number of troubles, we will succeed more. So this tendency of putting the word Islamic everywhere, unnecessary, wherever we need to put it, we should put it, but not everywhere unnecessarily, because then we drive the other people away. It will be Islamic in Muslim societies, but for other people it will be in keeping with their own faith and religion. And many of our principles are there in their faith also, and there is no harm in calling towards these the people towards these universal values brought by the different messengers of God at different times in the history of the world. Thank you.